Yo, today I want to talk about a proposed policy or a ballot initiative that's taking place in my state. Might be taking place in yours too. I haven't really seen how widespread this is, but I know I just called it a policy or a ballot measure, but let's talk about the concept of open or closed primaries. And the simplest explanation is, if you're registered to a major political party, Democrat or Republican, if you live in a closed primary state, that means that only you can vote in your party's primary election, the election that determines who runs in the general election. If it's an open primary, I believe anybody can vote in any election. So I've been getting these ads in the state that I live in talking about, oh, I'm an independent voter, or I'm a such and such, I'm a teacher, I'm a firefighter, and I want to have control over my daughter's future on abortion, or this, that, or the other, but I can't do that because I can't vote in the primary. And I'm going to kind of state my position here and the nuance, but also, like with a lot of things, I'm not here to strike some neutral or perfect balance between positions. I'm never going to try to force that on this channel. But I am a firm believer that spirituality and metaphysics or whatever aside, I think there are some forces out there that try to, even if we live in like chaos or entropy, that there's some stabilizing forces out there that are trying to strike a balance. And I kind of think that's the case here, where in general elections, who do politicians usually pander to? The swing voters, the so-called independents. And I know independents aren't always swing voters, but I would wager a guess that they are far more likely to be that. If you're not, I'm going to use this word kind of strongly here, if you're not committed enough to pick a party, and let's put the discussion of the number of political parties we have in this country, that's for another video. I'm just talking about with what exists today. If you don't have the means or the mental stamina or the, even at times, mindlessness to pick a team, so to speak, then they're going to pander to you. They're going to go campaign in your state or your city because they know or feel that they've got everything else down. And again, that's kind of an indictment on the two-party system, and it's also kind of an indictment on our electoral college, because how many states and how many campaign stops have been ignored for decades because politicians view it as a lost cause? If we went to a popular vote system where you had to earn everybody's vote, then Wyoming or a deep blue part of California might get more campaign stops for a change. Something to think about. So the balance I'm trying to discuss here, and why I'm kind of okay with closed primaries, is that's the balance. Us partisan hacks that have committed to a political party, whether we love that party or not, it's just the one that we chose. Doesn't mean we always agree with it or love it, but we picked a party. We are a registered Democrat or a registered Republican. That's our opportunity to be pandered to be appealed to. Because people that pick a party, I would guess, are probably a bit more politically engaged. I'm not saying that there's not an independent person out there that's more politically engaged or knowledgeable than somebody like myself. But my guess is, if you feel like the nuance of politics hasn't lumped you into either one side or the other, which I know that in and of itself is a contradictory statement. But if you think about it, it really isn't. That's the balance. During the general election, the Democrats and Republicans already feel like, generally, that they've got their fucking bases either fired up or that they've got their votes secured. So who do they campaign for? Who do they appeal to? The swing voter, the flip-flop voter, the ones who change with the winds, the ones who possibly forget what actions led to today's problems. And I could do a whole another video on the problem with swing voters. and probably completely disqualify myself from ever holding any public office if this video or my identity leaks. But the reason I'm okay with closed primaries is that's the chance for the partisan hacks, the people who are committed, at least for the time being. You can always switch parties. That's the chance for us, for our voice to be heard, because other than that, our voices aren't really heard. The politicians already assume they've got our vote. So in the general election, they're already pandering to the swing voters, or maybe more so the independent voters. They see that the Democrat and Republicans in polling on certain races are neck and neck. But what's that undecided chunk doing there? What's that independent chunk doing there? That's the chunk that the Democrat or the Republican are going to want to take and get them over the edge. And look, in time, our political parties might splinter off and form third, fourth, or fifth parties, and they already exist. They're just not as big. Like, ideologically, I might align more with the Green Party than with the Democratic Party, because I think the Green Party is probably one of the closer parties to, say, like a progressive ideology. But unfortunately, that's just structurally not where we're at right now. I do agree that we should have more parties, but for the way things are right now, we're in this two-party major system, and if I feel like my voice isn't going to be heard or appealed to, and if you agree with this sentiment, you can certainly let me know. And I'm not really going to be campaigned for during the general election when it really counts. Shouldn't I get some more cookies during the primary? Shouldn't I have more of a say of my party's representation versus some outsiders who can't even pick a party or stay committed to a party? And it doesn't mean that if some current events happen and you switch parties that you have to then go vote for another party's primary. But in a closed primary system, if you switch parties on time, you can still vote in that closed primary. But for the sake of an open primary, it seems like these swing voters or these independents want a little too much when they're not even realizing that they're the ones that are already getting everything, in my opinion. I think politicians, and it's unfortunately a product of the time that we live in and the political and media environment that we live in, almost said landscape, that we live in, that, yeah, it is the that's how the 2016 election was won by Trump. It was a vicious campaign tactic towards the reachables, or the I forgot what terminology they used. The whole Cambridge Analytica thing with the swayables, basically just a targeted ad campaign towards the swing voters, just so they could win on the margins in key states. That's why I'm okay with closed primaries, because the rest of you are getting hyper-targeted and used to win on the margins until we can get back to a place where landslide elections become more normalized again and our media environment's less polarizing, which leads to the perception of a polarized nation, even though we agree on more than we believe. But then the second part of this question, this proposed ballot measure is, hey, how do you feel about ranked choice voting? I'm all in favor of that. I think it's a good idea. I think the ranked choice voting gives third parties and independents more of a say and more of a voice, so that it's not this team sports, hold my nose and pick the slightly corrupt Democrat over the fascist Republican, or the quote-unquote moderate Republican versus the 1 in 200 pro-life Democrats. Not even pro-life, they're forced birth. So I think that's the balancing act, if I hadn't made that clear yet. I think closed primaries give people who've committed to a party more of a voice, because their voices are otherwise assumed or discarded during the primary elections. Aside from the fact that they need the base's vote anyway, they have to do things to excite their base, whether it's through fear or it's through beneficial policy. I still think that otherwise it's all about the swing voters and the independents that the media or the pundits or the politicians or the pollsters seem to focus a lot on. And us partisan folk, we matter too. So yeah, I guess let me know what you think.